Yeah, I think definitely for the next decade, more of AI is around that, right? It's going to be around augmenting humans to make them better. It's going to be around filling in gaps in jobs that are dangerous or boring or things people don't want to do. And so, the example I give is imagine a construction worker who can wear a robotic exoskeleton and now safely lift 400 pounds instead of 100 pounds. Like, you still need the frame and the brain and all that of the construction worker, but a lot of the tasks, they can do a lot more. And we're really going through the cognitive equivalent of that. One of the things that businesses are struggling with right now that I see across my investment portfolio and at Tala is, where to apply this stuff and why and how. It's typically starting in a company with the executive who's just the most interested in it and the most progressive and forward-thinking technically, not necessarily where it might provide the biggest economic advantage to the company. One school of thought says, hey, this has been predicted before, but we always overcome it and it's not an issue. Now, that may be true, but what's different this time is you can see a future where computers are better at people than everything that they might do.
Hello, everyone. I'm Larry Weeks, and this is the Bounce Podcast. Thanks to science fiction movies and books, the abbreviation AI, along with its phrase artificial intelligence for many, invokes fantasies of AI overlord robots everywhere, or benevolent machine assistants, or sexy operating systems. And it can be difficult to separate hype from reality, even within the tech startup community, as the term AI is tossed around in pitches and in marketing. And newsfeed cycles don't help either. There are stories that are circulated with titillating headlines as to what AI has just done or is doing or about to do, without any focus to what it can't do or maybe where it's failed. But we should pay attention, because the ultimate goal of AI is not only to make machines intelligent, but as intelligent as humans. So where are we today? What is the state of AI as of mid-2019 anyway? What are the current uses of AI? How are companies applying it? What is the fantasy? What is the reality? Enter my guest, Rob May. Rob May is the CEO and co-founder of Tala, a Boston-based company building digital workers for the enterprise through AI and machine learning technology. Prior to Tala, Rob was the CEO and co-founder of Backupify, the world's first cloud-to-cloud backup company. It was acquired by Datto in 2014. Rob has held engineering, business development, management positions at various startups and has a track record of venture backing. And to our topic today, Rob is an angel investor in over 45 AI companies and is the managing director at Half Court Ventures, which focuses on seed stage funding. Rob also writes Inside AI, the world's most popular email newsletter on artificial intelligence, which I've been subscribed to for some time, and I recommend you do the same. So consider this podcast a mini course on AI and real world AI. I wanted to have someone like Rob on, not only because of his deep expertise running his own AI company, but his broad exposure as an investor in many different types of AI forward companies. So just a note, some of the discussion can get a little technical, but hang in there. Rob pulls it all together. And we talk about what is the hype and reality of AI, real world applications, what's working, what's not, how and why companies are failing with AI. I get his perspective on the near-term and long-term future of AI. How should companies and people prepare? What are now and what will be in the future the opportunities of AI? Where does he see the value of AI coming from in the near term as far as companies and verticals? How does he evaluate companies to invest in who say they use AI? And a lot more. One other note, some of the terminology that we use, the abbreviations AGI and ANI are used. AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence, which would be the intelligence level of a machine if it could perform any intellectual task that a human could perform. We are not there yet, but Rob and I talk about how far he thinks we are from that. And ANI is Artificial Narrow Intelligence. Okay, Google, intro, Rob May.
Okay, now here is Rob May.
Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Larry.
Thanks for coming on. This is a fascinating subject for many people. There's a lot of mythology that is kind of built up around the subject, artificial intelligence. I wanted to have somebody like you on because of your current experience and what looks like to be a really broad exposure to AI in general, you're not only CEO of a kind of an AI company, but you are an investor.
Yeah, I have. So at the moment, I have about 62 angel investments, and probably 50 of them are AI related, and all levels of the stack. I have 3 AI hardware chip companies. I have some robotics companies, application layer, AI stuff, which all kinds of things.
So let's talk about the business of AI. First of all, I just got to ask: are you a sci-fi fan?
I mean, I liked it growing up, but I wasn't deep into it. I did more Star Wars than Star Trek. Is one thing I would say. And I didn't, I've read a couple of sci-fi books here and there, but I wouldn't say I was deeply into it. No. But there is a great book if you're interested in the future of AI. One of the best books I've read on it is a book called Manna, Manna, which is about AI actually starts with middle management. It doesn't start at the low end of the totem pole. Doesn't start at the high end. It starts with middle management. I'll let you read the book to figure out how that happens. And then the United States and Australia take 2 very different paths for AI and end up in very different places. And so it's a really good thought experiment.
The reason I ask is I wanted to get your favorite AI movie, right? Do you have a favorite?
That's a really good question.
It's kind of like the time travel movie question. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Ex Machina was pretty good.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. Yeah.
A little bit over the top given where the technology is today, but yeah, still good.
I liked Her. If anybody hasn't seen that, I'm just calling out Her was interesting.
That's good as well.
Speaking of the sci-fi, I read it in one of your newsletters. This book, M.
Yes, The Age of M by Robin Hanson.
The Age of M. Yes, that's it.
EM is how you spell M. M is a word, and it stands for emulation.
So why did that interest you? So first of all, I got it. And it's this thick book, and I'm going through it, and the premise. Correct me if I'm wrong here. The scenario is that in 100 years, human brains will be scanned and combined with some kind of executable model of artificial hardware or something, kind of a replication of yourself.
Yeah. So if you think about machine learning as models that are doing work and models that are learning things, and you think about humans as also models, right? Information patterns, then a lot of people believe that over time you will be able to tie these 2 things together, right? Scan human brains or do something to get the human brains into silicon or something similar, or bring the silicon to human brains and make them live longer, whatever it is. And so the Age of M starts to say, like, let's just assume that all this happens. Where does it go and why? And so it looks at it from an economist perspective, right? And says, well, why would you run faster or slower? Why would you maybe have a bigger brain and a bigger model than a smaller model? And a lot of it boils down to power consumption. And what does that mean for how cities are constructed? And so it's a really, really fascinating book that looks at some of the economic and sociological implications of potential long-term AI.
Just to kind of set a baseline, I'm just going to use, in a very broad sense, AI as any computer program that does something smart. Do you kind of go along with the classifications of ANI and AGI? If I use that, is that okay?
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, there's a lot up for debate in the industry itself, right? But, AI, data science, machine learning, which one is a subset of the other, right? Because there's different types of overlap. For example, there are AI methodologies that are not machine learning methodologies, right? So symbolic logic processing is not really machine learning, but it's AI. But a lot of people would put AI entirely under machine learning because there's a bunch of machine learning techniques that aren't really AI either. And so I typically define AI as any program, computer program, or something similar, any model that you're going to put out into the world, and it is going to learn and change on its own based on its interactions without the programmers having to redo it.
So when we talk about ANI or artificial narrow intelligence, I'm referring to things like Siri and Google Home, that kind of thing, right? A specific task or speech recognition, kind of a narrow. ANI is for artificial narrow intelligence versus general. So it seems like most of the progress that we're seeing today, at least in real world applications, is pretty much artificial narrow intelligence. Do you see something else?
No, the vast majority of stuff, I think you're very correct, right? Things have not moved very far in terms of broad-based cross-domain learning or reasoning or any of the higher level cognitive functions. It's all very targeted around most AI applications or some kind of learned classification or prediction maybe some kind of automation application, but pretty narrowly targeted. The things that do seem sometimes broader and impressive are usually some of these things they do on video games where they have an entirely closed domain space, right? You know all the rules, you know all the pixels on the screen. Nobody's done anything very impressive in a sort of open real world domain yet.
So tell me about your company.
Yeah, so in addition to writing the newsletter and doing a lot of investing, I run a company called Tala. Tala's in the customer support automation space, and we think of ourselves as an automation company more broadly. And we started with customer support because our specialty is in automating tasks that involve natural language. And so what we do that's different from a lot of other companies is that we don't take your ticketing data and just train a model on it, right? That's what most people do. Give us all your support tickets. Let's look at the questions people ask. Let's look at the answers. Let's train a giant language model on that data set. We do that. We do part of that as well, but we actually read in your original support documentation. And we have a very cutting edge machine comprehension model that will start to parse that documentation and actually be able to learn basic things of it. And so the way that translates into a difference as a user is if you ask a question, if you train a model on tickets that you've seen and somebody asks a question that's never been seen, the model's unlikely to be able to answer it. Our model's likely to be able to answer it, right? Because if it's in your original documentation. And so it's interesting to watch how these industries play out, right? Because the companies that are in here, Tala and others, we compete actually not that much on the AI, a little bit on the AI, right? Who performs better here, who performs better there? But a lot of it is actually around your traditional variables, right? Where can I access the tool, right? So one of the stands we made is we're available in Slack, Microsoft Teams, Chrome plugin. So you can use Tala in more places than you can use most of our competitors, right? And then typical product management stuff, right? We have a rep-facing product that reps can use and a self-service product that customers can use. And a lot of people say, "Oh wow, there's so many companies in this customer support space." The reason there are so many is because there's a lot of customer support workflows. Different companies are configured very different ways depending on your price points, who your customer is. Are all your customers roughly the same? Do you need to segment them? It's just really, really different. Do phone support, chat support, email, web. We do a couple of predictions, right? When a question comes in, obviously we try to automate the answering of that question. If we can't, we try to predict who's most likely to answer it and get it routed to them. As well as when you write support documentation, we can do lots of other automations. So an example might be somebody says, "Hey, how do I change my shipping address?" We can also automate the process of walking you through that form, right? So a rep doesn't have to do it on the phone. If you're writing your documentation and maybe you're writing in something in there about Salesforce or Jira or here's the next step, because we have those hooks and integrations, we'll actually predict the automations as well. "Hey, I think we can automate this for you. Do you want to try it?" And so the goal is really to be able to automate more and more and more of the work that somebody does so that those employees can move higher up the cognitive stack.
So the IDC is forecasting 60%, something like 60% of companies will bring AI into everyday business in about 3 years, 2022 or so.
I have a hard time believing that.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is that realistic or not?
I mean, they want to, right? The desire for AI is really, really, really strong. But you run up against physical barriers to deployment at some point. And you may remember a time when computer processor speed was everything, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, we went from 133 megahertz to 200 megahertz. Like, I got to get the next greatest thing. And you got to the point where the processor wasn't the bottleneck anymore, right? It was one of the communication buses, right? It was the accessing the memory. It was something else. And so speeding up your processor a lot doesn't really matter. And so if you think of the organization as a system, the problem with deploying AI is all those other pieces, right? The bottleneck and the challenge isn't that AI isn't ready or doesn't work. It's changing behaviors of people and getting them to use these new tools. And so the rollouts are hard. And so we invested very early in sort of account executive customer success type of team. And I think your most successful AI companies have done this as well, to really drive that change. And you have to build a bunch of functionality into your product that makes it easy to adapt from existing workflows. So I think the change is going to be, I think what you're going to see by 2021, whatever your number was, is that you're going to see a lot of failed AI projects where the technology worked, but the host organism, the company, didn't accept the change very well.
Yeah, McKinsey Global had a estimated $13 trillion US of value annually by 2030. So if AI is already creating some kind of enormous value now, let's say in the software industry, where I kind of came from, I guess, but where do you see the bulk of future value to be had outside of pure play software?
Yeah, the early applications are going to be the ones that augment humans in ways that automate routine decision making, that increase our ability. AI is going to lower the cost of making predictions about things. And so you think about having a role where you have somebody who effectively you could boil down their job down to making intelligent predictions for the company about something, and maybe you pay them $150,000 a year, and now you can have a model that costs you $20,000 a year that can do the same prediction and do it better.
Are you talking like a data scientist or something? Or?
A data scientist, but even a lot of a sales manager in some sense, right? Is trying to predict what deals are going to close and what to work on, right? Financial modelers, lots and lots of different roles that actually do this kind of thing. And so I think you're going to be able to automate a lot of people's jobs, but not enough that you can replace the jobs, at least not in the next decade. And so what's going to happen is, more and more people are going to become way more productive because they're going to be augmented by AI. I think that will lead to big gains in the economy. But it's going to take a little bit longer to roll out than people think, I think. We're in that phase where companies realize that they're failing in rolling it out. And so the question is, in 2 or 3 years, will those issues all be corrected or not?
Is it a technical challenge or is it implementation? Well, probably the same thing, I guess.
I mean, it's a little bit of both, right? So, but some things are cultural too. So for example, let me give you 2 examples. One is, we're not used to dealing with probabilistic outputs. So if you work day to day in some kind of role, and you're used to getting binary answers from your software, yes or no, and now you get a probabilistic answer. I'm 94% sure that it's this. You haven't been taught to exercise your judgment against the machine, right? Because the machine's always right. And now there are cases where the machine, doesn't, the machine is going to be wrong sometimes, much like a weather forecast. Occasionally it's going to be wrong. And then when it is wrong, you need a training workflow. And so we don't have workflows built into organizations right now where we take the outputs of our work products and we go back and we say, oh, you know what? Actually, that was incorrect. And so we need to retrain the model, and here's why. But you can think about it the way you might think about an employee, right? When an employee comes up with the wrong answer on something and you have to go explain to them, no, you did it wrong. Here's what you missed about this use case. We're not used to doing that with software. So those kinds of workflows have to come together. This concept of training things is something people don't realize. I mean, I've seen this at Tala, right? So we had a customer who said, when you deploy Tala will try to ask you questions about your support documentation to learn more things. So you imagine an employee coming in your room and your office and saying, hey, I'm reading these 2 documents. What's the difference between X and Y document? Is it this? And you say yes or no, and they learn from that. Well, what we'll do at Tala is we will try to predict something like that from the document. And we'll ask an employee, hey, is this true? So we're deploying at a company, this was last year, and the guy said, look, I can't, he's like, my frontline people can't afford even to spend 5 minutes a day training Tala. Like, they're just too busy. I can't ask them to do that. Like, we're overwhelmed. I have to hire more people. And I said, well, how much time does it take for you to train a new employee? And he said, oh, that takes about 2 weeks. Oh, wait. I get it, right? Like he hadn't put together that training this software would save him the time, would be faster than training an employee, and he'd only have to do it once.
That's very interesting that people are not used to dealing with probability. So first of all, what is your tolerance? Is it confidence interval for deployment? Like, this is good enough at 95%, this is good enough.
We sort of let the user work on some of that, right? So if you're going to deploy Tala, particularly customer facing, we're not going to be 100% accurate, right? No machine learning model is, just like no person is. And so the question is, what do you want us to do if we're 96% certain? Do you want us to answer, or do you want us to open a ticket, right? And you can sort of set that threshold depending on the kind of experience and performance that you want. And I think that's what most similar companies are doing.
Do you have any insight into, or any companies that you work with on the robotic side or the manufacturing side?
Yeah. So what we're starting to see on the robotics side is people combining machine learning types of technologies to do other things, right? Together. So take a company I'm an investor in. It's called Root.ai, and what Root does is they work on indoor farms, right? Giant greenhouses, and they have a robot that combines machine vision with a very well, how would you say this?
Machine vision is recognition between two distinctions.
Yeah, and they use it to recognize when fruit is ripe, and it can scan the plants, and it can say that tomato's ripe, and it has a hand that can learn how firmly or softly to grip the tomato to pull it off without damaging the tomato. So it can do this better and faster than a human. 70% of the cost of indoor farming is labor to go identify and pick the ripe fruits, and so this can make all that more efficient. And these are people that are hard to find and hard to hire.
Is that kind of what you see, at least near term, is not so much a displacement, but either filling in gaps for workers or augmenting the current kind of labor force?
Yeah, I think definitely for the next decade, more of AI is around that, right? It's going to be around augmenting humans to make them better. It's going to be around filling in gaps in jobs that are dangerous or boring or things people don't want to do. And so, the example I give is, imagine a construction worker who can wear a robotic exoskeleton and now safely lift 400 pounds instead of 100 pounds. Like, you still need the frame and the brain and all that of the construction worker, but a lot of the tasks, they can do a lot more. And we're really going through the cognitive equivalent of that.
Paul Daugherty has written about AI he uses a kind of a wave analogy, first wave, second wave, in terms of history, with each wave, technological wave kind of building on the other. He uses the framework of, he says standardization was first, like Henry Ford, the assembly line, and then automation in the 90s, computers and everything, some of what we're doing now. And the third wave, he says, is adaptation, right? Things are learning and adapting to our situations. Would you agree with that kind of analogy?
Yeah, I think that's mostly correct. I think it's really one of the things that businesses are struggling with right now that I see across my investment portfolio and at Tala is, where to apply this stuff and why and how. It's typically starting in a company with the executive who's just the most interested in it and the most progressive and forward-thinking technically, not necessarily where it might provide the biggest economic advantage to the company.
Can you talk about some of the companies? What's some of the cool things that they're doing that these companies that you're invested in, if you can?
Yeah, so there's a bunch. Some of my favorites. I'm an investor in a company called Koniku, Koniku, that is embedding rat neurons into silicon to make intelligent chips. So that's a super interesting technology. I'm an investor in a company called Mythic, which is building a new deep learning chip that uses 1/100th of the power of what you would need from a similar thing from NVIDIA. So it's really targeted towards edge applications where you don't want to send data back up to the cloud for inference. So if you're not familiar with how AI hardware works, when you're going to create a model that does something, so let's say I have a table that has a bunch of things on it, and I'm trying to identify, is that a fork or a spoon or a plate, right? So I'm going to give it a bunch of examples, and I'm going to train it up on thousands of examples. The training phase typically needs a lot of power and processing speed to run on a GPU, and then the inference phase also needs to run on a GPU, but they're different in how you would do them. And so most of these edge applications, people are building chips that can do inference but not do training. So you have to train in the cloud, but maybe the latency of sending something back up to the cloud to make an inference and send it back might be too expensive, might be too slow, or whatever. And so Mythic has a chip that you can use for video applications on the edge that's just as powerful as sort of the NVIDIA equivalent. And then I have a really interesting company called BotKeeper, and BotKeeper is an automated bookkeeping company. And so think of it this way, that you just email, Joe Smith at botkeeper.com, Joe Smith responds back to you. Joe Smith does what you ask. Sometimes Joe Smith is a person and sometimes Joe Smith is a machine learning model. You don't know the difference, but the people step in and do what the models can't. And as the humans do more and more, BotKeeper records what they do and uses that to train more machine learning models as they get more data sets to do things. And so you can simultaneously get cheaper but more accurate bookkeeping because so much of it is offloaded to machines for BotKeeper. So it's pretty cool.
That's interesting. Regarding the chip, would that have 5G kind of applications?
It might, but they're scoped, somebody like Mythic, they're going to be scoped smaller than that. So they might go in a 5G application, but they're not going to build that part of their chip.
As an investor, are you looking for AI forward companies or more companies that are, which it sounds like some of these are kind of AI as a utility? It's in the background driving, the end result. Yeah.
I look for both, right? So I split the world into what I call map and machete companies, right? And what I mean by that is map companies are companies that are entering a relatively established market or a relatively established use case, and they're bringing one major change to it. And hopefully that change is going to disrupt the incumbents, right? And so this could be that, you're going after the car insurance market, but you're using blockchain and crowdsourcing to let all the people build the collective insuring by themselves. But you know how to sell insurance, you know how to price insurance, all these things are known. Another example of these might be a lot of these companies that are using machine learning to help telemedicine or diagnose problems in X-rays or whatever. These are use cases where I call them map companies because there is a clear map of the terrain, and I'm interested in how well you know and understand that map, and are you taking the right path based on that map. Machete companies are companies that are in entirely new markets.
Why do you call it machete?
So I think about it this way, right? There is no map. You were dropped off in the woods, so you better hope you have a really sharp machete because you're going to have to cut for a long time. You're going to have to cut in one direction. It's not going to be right. You're going to have to turn around and cut the other direction. So there, I'm more evaluating the entrepreneur, right? I'm trying to figure out, is this the kind of person that again, you can imagine saying like, well, I hear a river over here. Let's cut this way. And then you get to the edge of a cliff and realize like, wow, okay, the river's way down there at the bottom of the cliff. We can't get across it. We got to go back another way. So, those types of entrepreneurs need to be able to sort of pivot and weave and think about how the industry's going to pan out. And so in those cases, I use ecological models to think about it, right? I think about, take something like chatbots, right? You can look at chatbots and you can say, okay, when I introduce chatbots into the system for customer support, for internal use cases, for selling or whatever, on my phone, on the web, what's going to change? What kind of flows are going to make people go to chatbots? What kinds aren't? And where's it all going to settle in? First, it's like introducing a new organism into an existing ecosystem, right? You come back from Japan with some bug that's never been in, Florida before. You let it go in Florida. That bug eats something eats that bug. The population may explode and then dwindle, and you never know. Where's it going to settle in, right? Is the bug going to find a stable equilibrium? Sometimes the bug could destroy the environment, right? Sometimes the bug could quickly get eaten, and so I'm trying to make those evaluations on these new kinds of companies and figure out what's the world going to look like, who are they going to disrupt, and how's everything going to settle in. And sometimes they look artificially successful for a while, right? Because when they're initially, and chatbots are a good example of this, they're initially introduced, there's a huge wave, everybody wants to do them before people start to realize they don't work for all the use cases we thought. We got to work through and find the real things. And so I think about those two things is how I sort of look at my investments.
Well, you said something about demand for AI is huge or growing, or is it across the board, or is it certain industries? Is it software companies? And is it people with huge data sets that are saying, we don't know what to do with this data?
Oh, it's what's happening is, people are reading that, AI can beat humans in chess and Go and all these things. And they're thinking, wow, AI's made a lot of progress. What can it do at my company? And so they're really just tire kicking, right? I mean, we've had a lot of calls at Tala over the years where you get on the phone with a vice president at a company and you think, oh, they're great. They're interested. They're going to buy my product. And I say, so tell me about your use case. Why'd you call us? And they say, well, our boss said we need more AI. And you say, well,
Okay.
You need more AI for what? And they go, well, we don't know. Tell us what your AI does, and we'll see if that's a use case for us. And it's very frustrating. And this is pretty common in the market right now. I hear it from a lot of my companies. And so there's a lot of market education that has to be done about where can you apply AI and where can you not? And then what do you need to apply it? Like, you need you might have an idea for what to do, but you might not have the data to do it. So it's not going to be very helpful
Right.
to you.
You don't have enough data. You may have data, but not enough. Is that an opportunity? I mean, just on the educational side or the auditing side?
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of stuff that people are starting to do around how to get better labeled data sets. And there's a lot of AI consultancies that are springing up. I know there's a few here in Boston that'll say, like, look, let us help you separate the real stuff from the hype and sort of where you should get started by looking at, looking at your business and where the opportunities are economically and from a data perspective. Where can you have an economic impact? And then what's the intersection of the Venn diagram of the economic impact and something that you actually have the data to do from a performance level?
Let's do more of the separating. Help me separate the hype from reality. First of all, I just want to say, again, I point people to your newsletter, but I loved your article on AI theater. Great term, because the premise is that although artificial intelligence should just work like in the background and make things better or make things do things better, it can backfire because you can't see it and customers get antsy. Could you just elaborate real quickly on that?
Yeah, my first company did backup for cloud computing applications, like Google Apps and Salesforce. And so we sold into really big companies. And at one point when we were just a few hundred customers and we were small, we had a customer cancel. And I said, why'd you cancel? And they said, well, I signed up and I started my backup and nothing happened. And we were like, well, stuff was happening in the background. We were starting the backup. We're going in over the APIs and pulling out the data. They didn't know that. They felt like nothing was going on. So we literally just put this bar at the top that started showing, now backing up your files, and started showing file names.
That's genius.
Yeah, and people were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like it's doing something. And so the problem with AI is, like, really good AI should ultimately just be invisible, right? It's like a person. You want if you hire an employee, you want that person to just come to you with the answer or the fully finished thing. That's what makes a good employee. But if you get the right answer with AI, unless you see something weird about how it works, you feel like it's not magic, right? You feel like it's wrong, or how did it know that, or it's not AI, it's just software. And so so it could be as simple as putting up a confidence score. Hey, I'm 99% confident. I'm 97% confident. Or trying to realize it depends on what your application is.
Yeah, some of the applications are theater in and of themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did stuff we had that problem in the early days of Talis. So we did stuff like, while you're writing your support documentation, we will start to guess at, we use some NLP to guess at, like, what your key, named entities are in your documentation. And we will start to make content suggestions that pop up, and like little kinds of things so that you can see that, like, oh, the tool understands what I'm doing and is trying to help me. Even though the things that, like, you could argue we should just, tag those entities on our own and be done with it and never even let you know we did it, but just because we don't need them tagged for the sake of tagging. We need them tagged so we can build better NLP models, right? And so ultimately, the output, which is a better NLP model that can answer a support question, tagging named entities is just a step there. But we need to show that we're tagging the named entities, so you see, like, oh wow, the tool's smart, it figured those out, even though you're never going to use those entities, right? So it's that's the way we have to think about it. So we call it AI theater. Yeah.
But I mean, it's a great lesson on the customer experience and how far that takes a customer to satisfaction or happiness or what have you, or delight, right?
Right.
Very cool. So let's talk about the hype. So AI innovation is more limited than you think, right?
Yeah.
So what is the hype? Is it around robots kind of running everything and taking jobs? What is the hype that you see right now?
So there's three areas of hype, right, that cause problems. I think one is old statistical techniques that are being repackaged as AI. So you have something like logistic regression, right? Logistic regression is, I'm going to plot all my points. I'm going to draw the best line through those points. And then when you give me a point on this axis, I'm going to take the point on that line and give you that as the answer.
It's a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Super simple thing to do. People that do a sort of linear prediction like that should not be building their product as AI, but You could do that. You could say, I have a tool that can predict home prices and it's AI, and you're like, actually, it's a 50-year-old basic statistics technology, right? Like it's not cool at all. What a machine learning solution for home prices would be able to do is actually draw, if you did that same plot, draw a very custom curve, through there, depending on a lot of different variables that would actually look, wildly complicated. And so overselling performance and basic statistics is one problem. The second problem is this generalized hype around killer robots and artificial general intelligence. And, is it gonna come kill us? Should we be worried about them? I think not now. I think it's not a problem now.
Well, hang on. So now you think that could be a problem? So let me just ask you, since we're going to get into the future, but where do you fall in the Musk to Kerswell continuum of, negative to kind of more positive views of the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, so I would say this. I would say there's no reason to believe that I'm not super worried about it, because there's no reason to believe that a brilliant, AI that was smarter than any of us or smarter than all of us together would necessarily be mean, or have any ill will towards. It might not. I don't really know how to predict what kind of intentions it might have. I do think we should probably regularly talk about AI safety because, like any new technology, there will be a lot of issues, and we should explore those issues. But I don't know that there's a reason to be overly concerned about the doomsday scenario. And I think it's probably a decade away before we have to start even giving it serious thought. I don't think we're at all close to general artificial intelligence, which leads me back to like the third point of the place where AI is overhyped is most of what you read in the press is research. It's not applied. It can't be applied yet. So when you read these amazing things, it's like, oh my gosh, now AI can do this. You're like, well, it actually can't. It can do that in a very controlled research environment with very clean synthetic data and unlimited compute power from Google or Facebook. It can't really do it on your smartphone in an open domain with messy real world data. The applications translating those breakthroughs from research to application in the real world is slow, and it's taking longer than people realize.
What about the aspect of displacement? Is that a possibility?
I think it is a possibility, right? I think so one school of thought says, hey, this has been predicted before, but we always overcome it, and it's not an issue. Now, that may be true, but what's different this time is like you can see a future where computers are better at people than everything that they might do. And so in that world, what happens? Well, what I would argue is that humans always seek status over other humans. And one of the ways they do that is when things become mass market, the high end now becomes artisan, right? And so, you can look back at history where humans made all the furniture. And so the best furniture maker was the guy you wanted to buy it from. Then furniture became mass produced. So now everybody could buy high quality furniture. So more artisan furniture became a thing again. So you could argue that there's a time where you're like, yeah, robots make all your meals. So you show your status by hiring a human to cook your meal, right? Like, oh, I can afford to pay 5x what the robot costs and have this sort of artisan meal. And the chef probably uses a robot to help or something, right? But so one thing that might happen is, more economic differentiation by artisans where humans do things that people value for the fact that they were done by humans.
Yeah, I always think of if I'm starting to put robots in, let's say my restaurant, that means I've got good business. People are buying my food, and people are employed to some degree. In other words, there's some level of economic lift happening if more and more technology is being rolled out. There's some need there. So personally, Rob, this is great. How would one prepare now for the current environment as AI is adopted in companies? Is there anything different one should consider this new technology and as it becomes ubiquitous.
A little bit, right? I think the value of things like communication skills and things that are harder for computers to do initially, I think is definitely going to go up. So I would encourage people to focus on that. And then really just this idea of learning how to learn, right? You're not going to know what the what the future holds. And so learning how to constantly learn, building workflows and skills for yourself where you're constantly challenging yourself and investigating new things, that's what's really going to help, I think, take you forward and prepare you for this world where things do change a lot.
So one more question. In these AI companies and maybe even in your company, was there any role staffing-wise in the company that was new because of this type of technology? Or do they all fall under the current umbrellas of dev and data scientist, and you know what I'm saying?
For now, they fall under the current umbrellas. But I will say it was hard for me, having built a cloud company before, to learn how engineering and data science work together, right? Because data science projects are a little more researchy, they're a little less predictable. If I tell you that I have 10,000 people a month come to my website, and I expect over the next year to grow to need to support 10 million people to come to my website, you kind of know what you need to do. You can make some estimates to make that work. There'll be some bumps along the way, but you'll do it. If I have a machine learning model that performs at 78% accuracy, and I think in order to get it to work for my application, I need 91% accuracy, your data science team, A, doesn't know if they can get it to 91%. And if they can, number two, doesn't know how long that may take. So it's very different from engineering in that sense. And so what your data science team would say is like, okay, how long do you want us to go work on this? We have some ideas. They can try things. Maybe they can get there, maybe they can't. People who have done more or less of this will have a better intuition about whether they can get there and what they might try, but it's not as codified as engineering as a discipline. And so that's been the biggest, I think, operational difference for me.
Out of Google, companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, I'll include Amazon because of Alexa. Do you find one of those companies being more likely to be the winner in this kind of race to AI?
Yeah, let me give you a couple different answers to that. I think if you're talking about pure artificial intelligence, right? Artificial general intelligence or whatever. I think Google is the most likely to get there the fastest in terms of how they're configured, the research they do, et cetera. I think from an economic value perspective, I think Amazon is going to benefit the most from it and have the most that translates directly into more market power, all that kind of stuff. And then I think you have two companies that are highly overlooked, which are IBM and Apple. And I think because Google, Facebook, and Amazon primarily see their assets as consumer data sets. Apple and IBM don't think about the world that way. Apple thinks about doing things on a local device. They're a devices company. They're less strong in cloud, and they have more of a data protection mindset rather than a data usage mindset. And IBM is more B2B focused. And so their model is, well, the customer owns the data, right? It belongs to the company. It's not ours to use and go do all this stuff with. And that leads them to think about AI development and application in different ways. And so I know people at both of those companies. I can tell you they're working on some interesting technologies that I think are going to benefit them in ways that aren't obvious, because Google and Facebook in particular like open source so much what they do, and they write about it, and they have these big consumer data sets. And so I think IBM and Apple are going to benefit in really unique ways from AI technology that's not that interesting to Google and Facebook and Amazon based on their use cases.
Rob, this has been great, man. I appreciate your time and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me real quickly how people can find you via the interweb.
Yeah, the best way to find me, if you want to check out Talla, it's TALLA.com. If you want to check out the newsletter, it's inside.com/AI. And then if you want to find me online, I'm on Twitter. I'm just at Rob May. And so reach out to me there is probably one of the easiest ways.
Rob, thanks again, man.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Google, did you like the podcast?
Yes, but you're underestimating artificial narrow intelligence.
Well, that is all the time we have today. Please spread the word if you enjoyed the episode. Leave us a review on iTunes and share it with your friends on your favorite social platforms. Big thank you to Sam Williams, my audio guy. Make sure you visit larryweeks.com for all my content, and we will talk again soon.